So I would like to talk about some hot new manga, series that are either brand new to the scene or have been around for a little bit of time now, but don't necessarily have the reception that potentially it deserves. Now, originally thinking about this idea, I was kind of excited to talk about newer series that have only just released and kind of watch their projection over the coming year or so. And if you all enjoy it, I can probably continue to do videos like this for a litany of newer series that come out. Kind of like a mini series to keep it on rotation and just focus on new stuff that people may or may not know about, whether it's super successful or not. So if this is something that you would be interested in seeing every month, 2 months, however many new series come out, I'm not entirely sure, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. This first series is easily the most popular one and is called Blue Box. I was actually rather surprised with the reception that the series got because it's very new within Weekly Shonen Jump. It is a romance story and there's nothing genuinely new about it. It's not revolutionary, it's not game changing, but the reception that it has received has been massive. It has managed to capture a lot of people's attention pretty much since chapter 1, which is actually rather impressive. And I was curious on why this was the case. Why did this series, compared to a litany of other things that have come out that I may feel is personally better or more enjoyable than it, why did this get that specific type of reception? What made it so endearing and enjoyable and engaging to have people talk about it so consistently from the first day it dropped? So I went to go read it and get a better understanding for it, and surprisingly I see where people are coming from. I still don't think it is as unique or inspirational, but to be honest, not everything has to be. For me, Blue Box sits in a very nostalgic realm. If you are someone that reads romance stories or has kind of floated around that genre to any degree, the late 90s, early 2000s to even mid 2000s is filled with this very specific concept and stylized romance that pretty much bolstered that community. It gave birth to this conceptual artistic style for romance genres, and it's something that became extremely popular within the industry and has been replicated ever since. But for a while, and especially within Weekly Shonen Jump, that concept or that stylistic nature hasn't been prevalent. It's been pretty much non-existent for a very long time now. Hell, even romance hasn't been a big thing within Weekly Shonen Jump. I think the last one was We Never Learn, and before that was Nisekoi. So they're very far and few between, and I feel like where the wave of people have kind of come in for this is the fact that this does tap into that late 90s, early 2000 romance. It taps into that style, it taps into that concept, and thematically it creates a very nostalgic aura. It feels comfortable. It's not trying to be something entirely unique. It's not trying to be something entirely different. It's just being itself. And it gives birth to very comfortable characters, very solid individuals with a specific mindset. And there's a lot of ways that this story can go. It uses sports as a backdrop to kind of interweave all of the individuals and to give them some sort of playground to be within while this romance blooms. So far, I think it's solid. I think it does a good job with what it's doing, and it taps into that nostalgic feeling if you are someone that has read those late 90s, early 2000 romance series. I would definitely love to see how it grows over time and the story that can be told from it. I have an interest towards some of these characters, and seeing that grow and be evaluated or challenged throughout the length of the narrative is something that I'm rather excited to witness. A quick synopsis of Blue Box would look something like this. We follow our main character, Taiki Inomata, who is a very average-esque player for a badminton team. However, he has a crush on a student that is a year older than him, who is in the first year of their high school, known as Chinatsu Kano, and she is a prodigy within the basketball team, someone that is effortless on the court and thrives within it, constantly practicing and honing her abilities, in comparison to Taiki, where maybe not so much. Because of the blood, sweat and tears that Chinatsu puts into her training and basketball efficiency, it's something that Taiki is kind of admired by. It's something that he has a lot of respect for, and he starts to fall in love with her. Little would he know that in due time they would actually start living together, thanks to their parents being longtime friends, and them meeting, growing and understanding one another very rapidly. It takes two teenagers learning about themselves, learning about love, putting them within the same household, and trying to maneuver around one another in a respectful and understanding type of way, all while they push forward to do better within their respected field. Taiki with the badminton team and Chinatsu with the basketball team, trying to evolve into the best person that they can be. Now, this series may be something a lot of people don't know about, because honestly, I didn't even know about it for a very long time until I seen an article surrounding the author. So the manga is called Soloist in a Cage, and it's been around since January 2019, and it only has 14 chapters, and I was curious on why it only had 14 chapters. Obviously, that's over 2 years ago now. The reason why this series actually gained my attention is because the author came back after a 2-year hiatus because they suddenly got extremely ill. And I was curious just based on the picture that I seen regarding it. Knowing that this author is back and hopefully a lot more healthier, I wanted to try and at least somewhat support them as best I can from reading the series on one of the official sites. And it is on there. It does have all of the chapters and it's actually extremely enjoyable. I was pleasantly surprised with what I was reading. What I didn't expect, however, is how dark and brooding and mysterious this series is, because it does a lot in favor for its characters. It does a lot for its atmosphere and the type of emotion that it's trying to invoke within you, and honestly how scarily accurate it can be sometimes. It's not to say that it one-to-one parallels human nature or the world in itself, but there is definitely a whole lot of things within here that you could easily see, if not has been a thing within the real world, and it's definitely not something that you want to see. It's not something that has some sort of positive outcome. If anything, it's the worst of what humans can be and the vicious, vile, self-destructive nature that it has on other people. However, with this suffocating atmosphere that it creates, it has these bright, vibrant peaks of happiness within it, stuff that you can center yourself around and hug onto. So while you're drowning in all of this despair and misery, you see this portion of happiness, you see this portion of light, and you cherish it wholeheartedly. It's a very normal way in manipulating the reader's emotions, but it's so effective and honestly quite addicting. So this is what a quick synopsis of Soloist in a Cage would sound like. We follow the story of Chloe, a very young girl with her little brother, Locke. They are within a very destructive, disgusting, and vile situation and place known as Prison City. It is quite literally a city surrounded by a wall that inhabits the worst of the worst criminals, from petty thievery and minuscule type crimes that wouldn't even feel worthy of being punishable to the worst offenses and offenders that you could think of. When you put them within a city, surround it with a very tall wall, and don't have it monitored or ruled over by any sort of government or military power, you have this city create its own ecosystem. It is ruled by power and disgusting nature and broken up into so many different factions. It is a place that you do not want to be in. Unfortunately for both Chloe and Locke, they were not put in this position. They were birthed within here. Their parents ultimately left them at a very young age, and Chloe has not left this room that she is within for a very long time, taking care of her little brother and hiding him away from the world, knowing how disgusting or atrocious the people within the prison city can be if they knew these two exist. Luckily for them, one individual, which is a notorious wartime criminal known as Colonel Ross Sandberg, is the only person to continuously bring them food. With their parents out of the picture for more than 6 to 10 months now, this is their only source of surviving. The kindness of another individual that we come to know as being a horrendous individual, someone that is planning to escape. Centered only on top of the wall and not inside the city, are robotic, militarized police that keep the escape attempts of the city in check. That is it. It is to stop people from escaping. They don't monitor the city, they don't go within the city rarely, they just stay on top of the walls. A tragic and fateful day would come along where both Chloe and Locke are completely separated, as Chloe manages to escape from the prison city with the help of Colonel Ross Sandberg, at the cost of losing her little brother Locke, which directly fuels her in the hope of finding him once again, to eventually years later coming back to this city with the right equipment, with the right mindset, with this murderous intent to survive, but also to find her brother and pray that he is still alive. So the last series I want to talk about is kind of a personal favorite-esque of mine. It's nothing incredibly amazing, it's nothing groundbreaking or revolutionary. If anything, it's kind of just grown a bit of a soft spot on me, and there's a very specific reason why. It uses color pages here and there, and I absolutely love when it does it, because throughout this entire story I've been reading it like any other normal manga, black and white, but there's one point that emphasizes so much of an emotional response that as soon as you turn onto the page, it is filled with so much color and life that just takes the original emotional response that you're meant to have and turns it into something much more. What's perfect about it is that it doesn't just randomly throw it in there. The story is structured in a very specific way to give birth to this colorful page moment, and it works in the best way possible. And if you haven't already noticed, it's left quite an impression on me, especially for a series that is rather simplistic but joyful at the same time. So this series would be known as Hokkaido Girls Are Super Adorable. Yes, the title is very on the nose, but this would follow two different main characters, Minami Fuyuki and Tsubasa Shiki, who is a young high school student that suddenly moves to Hokkaido, and Hokkaido, from my knowledge, is more centered around being a country town. At least in comparison to something like Tokyo, Hokkaido is a whole new experience, and Shiki falls in love with it. He loves all of the small quirks and understandings and habits that Hokkaido has, loving every moment that takes place within it. However, his first encounter, conversation, and introduction to Hokkaido is a very specific woman, one that upholds herself with a lot of confidence and breathes this very cheery, energetic, filled with life type of attitude. It's something super addicting and something Shiki is very surprised by. It's a whole new realm and a whole new personality within Hokkaido that he hasn't really experienced before. So it leaves a massive impression on him. Turns out this same woman, Minami Fuyuki, also goes to his school and is also within his class. So the two kick it off rather well. And from here we follow their journey, them coming to grow and understanding each other, bringing in new people into their group, Shiki coming to learn about the different parts of Hokkaido and coming to love and be a part of it on a daily basis, especially thanks to Fuyuki. Mix this with some very beautiful artwork, the use of very specific color panels to emphasize an emotional response in the most beautiful way possible, and the most on-the-nose crude humor that you can imagine, and you have an experience that is definitely enjoyable and not overly serious, which I think is the biggest thing to take from this. This isn't meant to be a super serious story. It's something that you can kind of blitz through rather quickly with the 50 odd chapters that it does have, because it is relatively unknown, but it's something just rather nice to read, to be entirely honest. I can get why people may not like the crude humor or the on-the-nose sexualization of individuals certain times, which is completely understandable, but I feel like it never gets too uncomfortable. It doesn't necessarily try to force itself down your throat or try to make it unbelievable in nature. Instead, it's definitely more so on the playful side and sometimes on the more obnoxious side. However, over time, it tends to reel itself back, almost like it's self-aware of the situation and tries to bring in more serious situational stuff. Because of how cheery and lighthearted the story is, when it implements this very specific moment, relationship situation with Shiki and a very specific individual, it genuinely took me by surprise. I had to sit back and reevaluate what I just read, because it's something that you do not see at all. And just with what the series upholds, this very dark and serious point of interest becomes so clear within your sight that it's so hard to look away from. Genuinely start to second guess yourself if you've missed a semi-dark undertone for the story, or if it's just something that has been added to keep the series interesting and alive. It's definitely more so the latter, but there is some loose and somewhat valid dark undertones towards the story, or serious undertones, I should say. So with that being said, that is basically it. If you have made it this far, I'd like to thank you. If you're interested in Blue Box, Soloist in a Cage, or Hokkaido Girls Is Super Adorable, let me know. Out of those three, which one piques your interest the most, or if you have read any of them, how'd you feel about them? Also within this similar format, is there any other series that you would like for me to talk about? If you haven't noticed, not all of these series are brand new, just stuff that has been around for maybe a year or two, but not a whole lot reception or attention attention has been brought towards these series. So if there is any, and you'd like to see a part 2, part 3, part 4, kind of like a mini series for this type of video, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Drink plenty of water, new video every 3 days, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.